All right, and we are live. What's up, guys? Welcome to Fed It, man. We got a lot to talk about. We got an episode on a hitman from the early 90s. It's going to be a great episode. Murder for hire. Let's get into it.
I was a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, okay, guys? HSI. The cases that I did mostly were human smuggling and drug trafficking. No one else has these documents, by the way.
Here's what FedEx covers.
Dr. Lafredo confirmed lacerations due to stepping on glass.
Murder
You
investigations.
see him reaching in his jacket. You don't know, and he's positioning. Been on February 13, 2019.
You're facing 2 counts of premeditated murder.
Racketeering and RICO conspiracies.
Young Slime Life, hereinafter referred to as YSL. The defendants, 6'9", and then this is Billy Seiko right here. Now, when they first started, guys, 6'9" ran with... I'm a Fed. I'm watching this music video. You know, I'm bobbing my head like, hey, this shit lit. But at the same time, I'm pausing. Oh, wait, who this? Right? Oh, who's that in the back?
Firearms and violent crime.
A.K.A. Pushaisi violated.
You're ordered to stay away from the victim.
Rapper Pushaisi arrested after shooting at King of Diamonds, Miami strip club, injured one person. This is the one that's gonna fuck him up because this gun is not traceable. Well, it happened at the gun range. Here's your boy 42 Doug right here on the left. Okay.
Sex trafficking and sex crimes.
They can effectively link him to paying an underage girl.
I'm gonna lock my fifth amendment right.
And the first bomb went off right here.
Suspect 2 set down a backpack at the site of the second explosion.
Inspired by Al-Qaeda. 2 terrorists and brothers, Dzhokhar Sarnev and Tamerlan Sarnev.
When the cartels ship drugs into the country.
As this guy got arrested for espionage, okay? Trading secrets with the Russians for monetary compensation. The largest corrupt police bust in New Orleans history.
The days of the police are gone.
So he was in this bad boy. We're gonna go over his past, the gang ties, so that this all makes sense.
All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to Fed It, man. I'm here with 2 special guests in the house, Christina and Mia. You guys want to introduce yourselves to the people real quick?
Hello, I'm Mia. Currently, a lot of what I'm doing is I'm doing TikTok managing for Fresh and Fit.
Yes, she
and
is.
Yeah, as
Shout
well
out to
as
her.
other social media / talent management opportunities that I've been pursuing.
Bam. Welcome. Then what about you, Christina?
Hi, I'm Christina. Honestly, I'm just gonna go down to Fed It. If you guys are in Memphis or New York, please contact me on IG at FedIt1811 or my IG at Christy Rojas. I just need people to get some documents.
Bam. She's right to the business.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, this is a second take, man, because I recorded this already, and then what ended up happening was the audio didn't play. So we're doing it again, man. It is what it is. Because we got to get this content out to you guys, man. We got to work hard over here. But anyway, with that said, guys, without further ado, we're going to break down a documentary from FBI Files you guys have come to learn and love. One of my favorite documentaries. This is a case from the early 90s that concerns a murder for hire investigation. So yeah, without further ado, ladies, you have anything you want to say before we get into it?
I'm excited.
All right, let's get into it, man.
When 3 people were found murdered in their home, it appeared like a burglary gone awry. But a crime this horrific deserved a closer look. The suspect who had the most to gain from the deaths also had the perfect alibi. Photographic proof that he was 3,000 miles away when the crime was committed. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It's our job to find the holes in even the most bulletproof alibi. In this case, we had our work cut out for us.
A Montgomery County, Maryland police officer responded to Vivian Rice's frantic 911 call. He found a female victim dead just inside the front door. He also found a second woman dead. And a young boy, apparently murdered in his bed.
You guys got 3 victims here. Need detectives and evidence technicians over here.
Through the day and into the...
Anytime bodies are discovered, guys, the primary job of the officer that discovers the scene is to, make sure the scene is preserved, safe, taped off, so that investigators can come and collect as much evidence when it's fresh as possible, because the first 48 hours is always critical to solving a murder case.
night, investigators would scour the scene for evidence, thoroughly searching both inside and outside the house. They soon identified all the victims. Mildred Horne was a 43-year-old divorced mother employed as an American Airlines flight attendant. She had been shot 3 times in the head. Her 8-year-old quadriplegic son, Trevor, who required round-the-clock nursing care, appeared to have been suffocated. Police found him disconnected from his respirator. And Trevor's overnight nurse, 38-year-old Janice Saunders, had been shot twice in the skull.
And that's where the noise was coming from, guys, with the respirator, because once, you know, obviously some danger arises or their blood pressure goes down or anything happens with their vitals, the machine starts to make a lot of noise, so the nurse knows to come over.
Skull and in the eye. Evidence technicians began work immediately. They were thorough, but there was little evidence to collect. They dug a single distorted bullet fragment from the wood beside Trevor's window. Investigators took swabs of blood, carefully collecting samples for DNA testing. But the blood would match only the victim's DNA. With so little to lead investigators to a suspect, technicians scrounged harder for clues, collecting anything and everything that seemed promising. Outside the house, investigators found a metal file.
That's going to be very important later on, guys, so make a note of that. They found a metal file outside of the home.
Police were thorough, but the killer had been meticulous. Montgomery County, Maryland homicide detective Craig Wittenberger, named lead investigator, struggled to make sense of a case with 3 helpless victims, no obvious motive, and few clues.
There were some things that struck us.
So this was the lead investigator on this case, guys. Typically, when it comes to homicide and and rotations, whoever was on duty on that night is the one that's going to clean up that case when it comes through, because homicide investigators are typically on call 24/7. So he got assigned this case. So as the main case detective, or case officer in this case, he's going to be the one responsible for gathering all the evidence, writing the reports, writing affidavits, preparing search warrants, and presenting the case to the ADA, or assistant district attorney, for prosecution.
As odd, I think, from the very beginning of the on-scene investigation inside the house, the foyer area, a closet.
And that's actual footage from the crime scene, which, you know, in the early 90s, they had to bring in probably a big ass camcorder and lug that thing in and take video.
The contents had been dumped, everything been pulled out of the closet, dumped onto the floor. We found a purse, which we would later learn ultimately belonged to Millie. You had a lot of stereo entertainment equipment, TVs, a lot of jewelry, furs, that was untouched and left, which again strikes you as odd. If this is a burglary or robbery going bad, you're going to take something.
Which back then, guys, you got to remember, back in the 90s, right? Having that type of equipment was extremely expensive. You know, any type of entertainment, television, entertainment equipment, VCRs, cable boxes, televisions, all this stuff was expensive back in the 90s, man. So, you know, this was very unnormal for someone to break into the house. It'd be all ransacked like that and no one actually take anything. You know, it's not like nowadays where you can get a TV for next to nothing. Back then, you know, things were a little bit more expensive, especially like good entertainment equipment.
What year was this?
This was 93.
Okay.
93. Way before you were born.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. When were you born, Mia?
99.
God damn, 99?
Barely a 90s baby.
In fact, Mildred's minivan was missing from the garage, as her sister had noticed. But it was found quickly, not far from the house.
So that's important. They found a car not too far from the home.
Some of Mildred's credit cards were also missing, but found the next day on a nearby roadside by a jogger.
Got y'all the closed caption, baby.
Investigators now positively eliminated burglary as a motive. Instead, they wondered if the missing items were a deliberate attempt by the killer to throw them off his trail. The scene had the earmarks of a planned, professional execution. As for a suspect, at the crime scene, Vivian told them Mildred's ex-husband, Lawrence Horne, was probably responsible.
Man, these captions are sucking right now. But yeah, so there we go, guys. We got our first suspect right now. Okay. Her husband, ex-husband, Lawrence Horne, guys, not Lawrence Home, but Lawrence Horne.
She begged them to investigate. He quickly became the prime suspect.
All the family members.
And just so you guys know, typically the first person that's found at the crime scene, or the person that discovers the crime scene, is almost always going to be heavily interrogated by the police. They're typically the first suspect, unless the police are able to quickly identify someone else. So in this case, right, you had a divorced woman that was murdered. You know, a likely suspect a lot of times is going to be the ex-husband. So she's able to quickly say, hey, it was more than likely Lawrence Horne that was involved. And the police were able to divert their attention to him. But you know, if you find a dead body, best believe that they're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you're going to be the primary suspect in the beginning with a homicide investigation. Because remember, guys, that first 48 hours is critical to them solving the case.
Were giving us this information that kept pointing to Lawrence Horne that would be based on the very stormy, rocky relationship that Millie and Lawrence Horne had for many, many years.
Danny, could you get this drum set up in number 5 for me, please? All right.
Investigators learned that in the 1960s and 70s, Horne had been a top producer and recording engineer for Motown Records, credited with many hits, including Shotgun by Junior Walker and the All-Stars. He'd married Mildred, an airline attendant, in 1973. Then he'd moved with Motown from Detroit to Los Angeles.
Okay, give me a test.
But when the company's fortunes waned, so did his. He and Mildred divorced in 1987, but their problems continued. As Bob Dean, Maryland Assistant State's Attorney, soon discovered.
All right. And when they say Maryland State's Attorney, guys, that's the equivalent to Assistant District Attorney. Same thing. He's a prosecutor at the state level. And as you guys know, typically the state takes exclusive rights when it comes to premeditated murder investigations. Feds are only involved in murder investigations when there's some other type of prerequisite crime involved, whether it was gang-related, racketeering, RICO influence. It was during the commission of a federal crime, like let's say a bank robbery. But when it comes to murder in itself, just standalone murder, premeditated or otherwise, it's almost always investigated by the state predominantly. So it would make sense that you got a Maryland investigator and then you got a Maryland Assistant District Attorney involved in the investigation.
We did some research on Lawrence Horne in the courthouse that day, particularly what the status of his child support payments were and whatever civil aspects of his ongoing civil battle with his wife were. And he had just been held in contempt several months before for failure to pay $18,000 in child support.
But in reviewing more
that's a clue right there. He owed some money.
Court records, investigators learned that on March 3rd, the day of the murders, Horne's financial outlook had brightened considerably. With his wife and son dead, he now stood to inherit $1.7.
Do we know why they died?
The money came.
$1.7 million. What was that, Mia?
His wife and son died.
Yeah.
Oh, so is this the wife and son?
I'm
stupid.
It just said the whole time, and it just said why.
Oh, well, it's because there was 2 dead women and then 1 son. So I was wondering if this killer was a random guy or if
No,
we're
gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. She's another world, guys. Don't worry about that. But yeah, so $1.7 million, guys. Just so you guys know, let me go ahead and show y'all what $1.7 million in 1993 would have been today. It's It would have been $3,484,364.71 today, guys. So that's what $1.7 million. So that's what he was standing to win if his son passed away. And obviously that would be split among him and his wife. So that each of them would have got like what, $650,000 back then in 1993. So if she's dead, he gets all 1.7 million, which in today's buying power is almost $3.4 million. So quick little recap of what's going on here. So far, there's 3 dead, right? You got the nurse, the mom, and the son, right? The son was on a respirator, and he was covered by some type of insurance that would have given him or some kind of lawsuit win that would have gotten the family $1.7 million. Obviously, Lawrence Horne had some issues with his wife. They were divorced. He was a former musician. She was an airlines attendant, and they were divorced, living on opposite sides of the country. And and that's kind of where we're at so far. But we don't know who the suspect is yet.
And
we're
he
going to get
owed
there.
$18K in child support.
And he owed
That's what it said.
$18,000 in child support. Yes, yes. Thank you, Mia. So there's obviously a strong financial motive here. So, it's looking like the police might have a solid suspect here. But let's see what happens next.
From a malpractice settlement awarded to Trevor when a routine operation left him with brain damage. Should Trevor die, the settlement also listed his beneficiaries.
The beneficiaries of Trevor were obviously his mother and his father, and that was Millie and Lawrence. If Millie were dead, Lawrence got everything.
At Detective Wittenberger's request, the Los Angeles Police Department contacted Lawrence Horne within hours of the murders.
Lawrence, I think you better come out here.
They tracked him to his mother's house.
Mr. Horne?
Police told Horne about the murders and were surprised by his response.
Am I a suspect?
No, sir.
Mr. Horne's behavior was very odd. It was odd enough that the LAPD officers took note of it from the very, very outset. Not only did he not want to cooperate and want an attorney.
And that's strange behavior, guys. Your son just got killed, and you're kind of like, oh, am I a suspect? What's going on here?
Basically, his only questions or inquiries about were whether he was a suspect in this thing.
Police took him to the station for further questioning. They asked where he was at the time of the crime. He told them he was with his live-in girlfriend, Shira Bogan, and described their activities. Later, they would question her, and she'd corroborate his story.
I was at home.
If Horne or someone he employed had crossed state lines to commit the crime, they would have violated the Interstate Travel in Aid of Racketeering statute, a federal offense under FBI jurisdiction.
Bam. So now that's how you get the feds involved, because now we can articulate if he was actually involved in the crime, that there was an effect on interstate nexus, which would allow the feds to be involved, because he's in LA. The crime occurred in Maryland, other side of the country.
Now, the FBI was brought in. A heinous crime had shocked the quiet community of Silver Spring, Maryland. A triple murder that brutally ended the lives of a quadriplegic boy, his mother, and his overnight nurse. With the prime suspect 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, the prospect of an interstate investigation loomed. Local detectives called on the FBI.
Okay. All right. Goodbye.
Special Agent Ed Roach was named case agent.
The case immediately became a coast-to-coast investigation because...
So same thing, guys. Case agent is the same thing as a case officer. So he's going to be the primary, person to contact the POC for the Bureau to help the state do this investigation. Because as you guys know, since it's a coast-to-coast investigation, well, the Maryland investigators are kind of limited because they don't have the jurisdiction to investigate a crime that occurred in Los Angeles, which obviously, if this did go down, it'd be considered a conspiracy. So that's why the FBI was brought in to help out.
The principal suspect was living at that time in Los Angeles. So we involved the Los Angeles division of the FBI. Perhaps that we could assist later in the investigation, either through profiling at Quantico or with the assistance of the FBI laboratory.
And profiling, guys, is when they're able to go ahead and identify a murder suspect based on characteristics left at the crime scene, how the murder was perpetrated, time of day, all these different factors go into it. So it allows the state and locals to be able to kind of hone in on who was more than likely the killer in the crime. And this especially is used in cases where they go cold or it's difficult to identify the suspect. But it's very important to note that the state is still the lead agency on this investigation. The FBI was brought in simply to assist.
Desperate for more clues, investigators sent a canine team back to where Mildred Horne's credit cards had been found by a jogger. The team soon recovered a rusty piece of metal, badly corroded, but clearly a gun part.
Got a silencer?
It's you'll see here in a second. It's not a silencer, but we are going to get there. But look at that. There's another clue right here, my friends.
Wittenberger sent it to the FBI lab for testing. FBI examiners determined the part was a trigger mechanism from an AR-7 rifle. A gun that's easy to disassemble into small pieces for transport or disposal, which seemed exactly what the killer had done.
Efficient.
Yeah.
He had also taken another step to distance himself from the weapon. He'd very carefully drilled out the serial number.
Oh, shit.
Often, a trained examiner can piece these numbers back together, but this killer had erased them for good. Another firearms expert would determine how long the gun part had lain by the side of the road.
So a quick note on serial numbers, guys. The reason why it's so important for crooks to get rid of serial numbers is because with the serial number, you can trace the gun back. Okay. The ATF or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, they're the ones responsible for any time you purchase a firearm, you have to fill out some paperwork. In that paperwork, that serial number is in there located on the gun. Okay. It's very difficult to drill out and or get rid of. And what happens is when you purchase that firearm, if that firearm is ever found on a crime scene or if it's ever discovered or reported stolen, whatever it may be, the feds are able to track it. And what they're going to do is, let's say they find your gun under, let's say I buy a gun and they find my gun at a murder scene 10 years prior. Well, they're going to later, they're going to come back to me, say, hey, you were the one that purchased this gun on such and such date. Where's that gun now? Or how did that gun end up there? And I'm going to be like, oh, well, you know, I have a bill of sale, right? Hopefully you would have a bill of sale if you sold it. And I sold this gun on such and such date. And then it allows the investigators to have a starting point to figure out how that gun got to that crime scene. Okay. So when the serial numbers are drilled out and or removed or whatever it is, which is a federal crime, by the way, to scratch out serial numbers, it's much tougher for the investigators to go ahead and be able to trace that gun back and get a starting point. You had something, Mia?
No, I just didn't know that it was illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal to scratch out serial numbers on a firearm. So let's get back to it.
Analysis showed the amount of corrosion was consistent with the time elapsed since the killings had occurred. So this was likely the murder weapon. While the FBI lab processed the gun part, investigators in Maryland interviewed Tiffany Horne, Lawrence and Mildred's 18-year-old daughter.
Right straight ahead.
She was a student at Howard University in Washington, D.C. They gave her a routine polygraph test, which she easily passed.
Polygraph test, by the way, guys, is simply a lie detector test.
Did you commit those murders?
They're not really doing them anymore, right? Because they're not valid.
Yeah, they're not admissible in court, but they still do them sometimes. Some agencies still do them on suspects. But if I was being investigated for a crime, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I've read it's more like a psychology trick.
Yeah, it actually, what it does is it asks it. Basically, when they ask you questions, it responds to your bodily functions.
I mean, in terms of why they still use it, even though it's not admissible in court, like they use it to kind of pressure the victim, or not the victim, the person that could be guilty
Yeah, into
just-
confessing or
yeah.
hey, you're lying on this test or whatever. It gives them, it's basically a tool for them to kind of like try to catch you in a lie. But yeah, it's definitely not admissible in court because there's so many people that can beat polygraphs. So a lot of crooks beat them all the time. And a lot of times it's innocent people that fail them. So
Psychopaths too, because it's based on your heart rate.
exactly. Yep. Heart rate, sweat, all different types of bodily functions are measured on the polygraph.
Later that day, Tiffany would talk with Detective Wittenberger, revealing 3 key clues. The first was something that had happened in the summer of 1992. Her father had called, asking her to videotape the outside of her mother's house for him, along with Trevor's room. The idea was so bizarre, she'd only taped Trevor and his nurse, with Trevor in his bed attached to his respirator. Tiffany gave the tape to her father.
And you guys got to remember, in 1992, that'd be a weird request because you got to walk around with a big ass camcorder trying to like record the shit, get on VHS, make sure you got an
I
empty
didn't
tape.
even think about that.
You know what I'm saying?
This is an iPhone.
It's not like nowadays where it's like, okay, sure, I'll record a video for you so you could go ahead and, commit a murder down the road. Oh, like, no, now, back then in 1992, it was extremely cumbersome to get video footage. So that's something that would obviously stick out in her memory.
Yeah, but iPhone's more
It's a weird request. What are you saying?
An iPhone's more traceable now.
An iPhone definitely is more traceable now.
Destroy the camera and that's it.
Yeah, but again, you got to remember, it's a weird request. So that's why she was able to remember it. Like, oh yeah, he wanted me to record the inside.
Now Wittenberger and the FBI wondered if Horne wanted someone to know the layout of the house. Then, on March 1st, 2 days before the murders, Horne had called her again. He wanted to know where his younger daughter, Tamiel, would be for the next few days.
Another clue.
Tiffany said Tamiel would be with Aunt Vivian the night of March 2nd because her mother was flying out on an early flight the morning of March 3rd. It made investigators suspect that Horne had known when the murders would occur.
Yep, he spared one child.
Tiffany shared one other revealing incident that day. At about 2:30, the morning of the murders, she had inadvertently called her mother. Tiffany had hit the wrong speed dial key on her phone. She'd meant to call her boyfriend.
Yeah, speed dial was a thing in the 90s, guys.
She apologized and hung up. The timing of the call helped investigators estimate the timing of the murders, along with another observation. Trevor's round-the-clock nurses made entries every hour in a logbook near his bed.
Based on that, the 2:30 phone call, the 2 o'clock entry in the nurse's log, and there not being a 3 o'clock entry, and the autopsy findings, I think we pretty much based the time of death as being around between 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
So look at all that circumstantial evidence, guys, between him wanting a strange recording of the inside of the house, right, with the layout, him making sure that his youngest daughter wasn't in the home, the nurse's logbook that showed that that was done on every hour, and then the final, which was, damn it, I'm drawing a blank here, ladies, help me. What was the other thing that was also weird?
Just asking where the daughter was going to be, the little one.
Yeah, there was one other thing that he wanted as well. Hold on. It was
First it was a video camera asking like
the video camera.
Yeah, and then the daughter.
The daughter.
And then it was
and then the fact that she called late at night, right? And accidentally was trying to call her boyfriend, but her mom was awake. She called her mom on accident.
Yeah.
So those were the things that kind of, of course, each piece of evidence by themselves isn't that important, but when it's all put together, this is strange. You know what I mean? So it definitely makes you get the red flag.
3 o'clock entry, and the autopsy findings, I think.
On March 11th, about a week after the murders, Wittenberger and his partner flew to L.A.
Police officer, search warrant!
With the assistance of the Los Angeles Police Department, they carried a probable cause affidavit to search Horne's apartment.
Yeah. So what they mean by that, guys, is what basically more than likely happened was the detectives in this case from Maryland got with a detective from Los Angeles, right? Hey, I have this probable cause. I need to search this residence. Can you swear to this affidavit for me and get a search warrant from the judge in your local area? Because as a Maryland officer, they don't have the authority and/or jurisdiction to swear out an affidavit in front of a judge in California. So LAPD gets involved. They get the affidavit, give it to a judge. He signs it. Boom. Now they're able to go ahead and execute a search warrant in another state, a state search warrant.
They collected hundreds of audio and videotapes. Police also gathered computers, personal papers, address books, bank statements, and telephone logs.
Still got about 2 to 3 hours more to go.
Back at the station, investigators began the time-consuming task of reviewing all they'd recovered. They'd printed thousands of pages from the hard drives of Horne's computers. They found he'd made handwritten notes on documents regarding Trevor's settlement money.
Oh, another red flag. Handwritten notes on Trevor's settlement money.
The notes confirmed what they already suspected. Horne was well aware he could gain a fortune from his son's death, and he was well versed in the legalities of the settlement. Investigators also found a map that was telling. It was hand-drawn, showing Mildred Horne's neighborhood. The streets were outlined and labeled. An X and her initials marked her house. Had Horne been directing a stranger to find her? Perhaps a contract killer. In the hundreds of hours of
More circumstantial evidence. Because remember, guys, he's in LA. Why the hell is he drawing a map of his ex-wife's home?
videotape that were recovered and screened, one home movie stood out. Horne had videotaped himself standing in front of his television set, which was tuned to the cable TV program guide station. The station was clearly broadcasting the time and date. 11:45 p.m., March 2nd, 1993, California time. 2:45 a.m., March 3rd, Maryland time. Exactly the time and date of the murders. Investigators quickly dubbed it the alibi tape, since it's...
Holy, my guy
He did that on purpose.
was prepared.
He totally did that on purpose.
Yeah, he was prepared. He had all this stuff in place, man.
But then those papers, isn't that kind of sloppy, having those papers with all the
Yeah,
notes?
but I
Like,
think
that
for him,
was-
he didn't anticipate that they would search his home.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
that's funny.
been created for that purpose. Now, Wittenberger and the FBI...
But you got to remember, he could always say, oh, well, I took notes on it because it was just, I need to know the policy and understand the policy, blah, blah, blah. Like, the thing with circumstantial evidence is that it's typically weak on its own and you can easily refute it, right? Like in that case, I found that your policy and you had a bunch of handwritten notes on it. What was that? Oh, well, he can easily explain, well, I just want to kind of know it. I wrote some notes, asked an attorney, nothing too crazy. But when you add the fact that, he wanted to make sure his daughter wasn't in the house. Mm-hmm. He asked for a strained VCR vid from his 18-year-old daughter of the home. He had a map of the home. And then you had the fact that he did a strange home movie where he was in front of the TV with the day and time saying, look where I'm at, niggas. Day and time right here. I'm here in LA and whatever. Then it starts to look more suspect. That's the beauty of circumstantial evidence when
it could be a hire, like
put
he
together.
Hired somebody.
What was that?
Could be that he hired somebody.
Oh,
like
we'll get there. We'll get
whatever.
there. Exactly. So we'll see what happens next. But yeah, the fact that he took all these steps to distance himself are definitely big red flags.
Seemed to have some substantial leads, but they were still far from apprehending the mastermind of this brutal crime.
There he is again. Same shit. He's walking back.
When investigators searched the LA apartment of their prime suspect in a triple murder, they discovered a suspicious videotape. Among themselves, they called it the alibi tape. But they would soon find a recording that was even more incriminating. A 22-second excerpt from Horne's dozens of audio tapes. It was from a conversation between Horne and an unknown male. The words were cryptic, but their meaning was clear.
Are you able to talk? No. Okay. All right. So I mean, I'm sitting there. Can you take a picture? I can take a picture of him. Right. There, but I could. The noise. You understand what I'm saying? I wasn't able to.
The noise.
Like the monitor.
We'll see.
See, I didn't want to go front wide.
After listening to that, we felt Mr. Horne probably was in Los Angeles at the time. We also felt after listening to that conversation that this was probably the individual that committed these homicides making that phone call.
With the help of the FBI, investigators subpoenaed telephone records from AT&T for all the calls placed to Lawrence Horne's residence from a week before the murders to a week after. Most were useless, but 4 long-distance calls stood out. 2 had been made just days before the murders from a Detroit payphone. The other 2 were made in the early hours of March.
So, guys, real quick, what's a subpoena? A subpoena is basically, a legal document that, requires a company or entity or whatever to go ahead and, if they want to summon some records or get some information. So investigators a lot of times are able to subpoena phone companies and go ahead and get toll records. What are toll records? Toll records are basically, phone calls coming in and out of a potential phone number and or cell phone or device, whatever it is. And they're able to go ahead and look at calls. And in this case, since it's a murder, what they're going to do is they're going to look at the toll records for a particular set of time to see, okay, who was Lawrence Horne speaking to during this period of time? Maybe we can identify the person that potentially was hired to commit this murder, because we know he was in Los Angeles, so would have been physically impossible for him to do it. However, more than likely, he's going to be in communication with the bad guy that's involved. So this is a common technique used from investigators to identify co-conspirators, subpoenaing phone records and getting those records. You can subpoena phone records, text messages, all that type of stuff. Now, are you going to actually see the contents of said communication? No, you would need a Title III for that. However, this will give you a good starting point to figure out who's who and identify other potential conspirators.
You can subpoena people too, right?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can.
I thought.
3rd from payphones near Mildred Horne's house. One from outside a Denny's restaurant and the other from a Days Inn.
And before you guys wonder what the hell is a payphone was a big thing back in the 90s. People didn't have cell phones, right? They had beepers, and if they needed to be contacted, they get the beeper hit. They go to the nearest payphone, put in a couple quarters, and go ahead and make that phone call. So
Beepers?
that's beepers. What is that?
Like a device that beeps when people are trying to contact you?
Yeah.
Oh my God, how old are you?
23.
Okay.
She has no clue.
Yeah, no.
I've never
no
heard
clue.
of this.
So
Yeah,
beepers are
beepers, man.
It's like before, it's like no one wanted a cell phone. They wanted like a beeper.
So it was like a signal hit if somebody's
It's like a
trying to
little
reach
device. So it's like you
Wow.
pretty much call it, and then your number pops up on it saying like you could leave a message.
But it's not a phone. You can't
no, like you just get a beep. It's like doctors still use it to this day.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, like you gotta be like, oh shoot, my friend said to call her. Okay, so go to a payphone or go to like a house phone. Just
Oh wow. I'm gonna Google this later.
Yeah.
wow.
I've
Yeah.
never heard of this.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I had to explain it, because I know a lot of young people are like, what the hell? What? Why is everyone using a payphone? This doesn't make sense.
That's okay.
So yeah.
The call
But that's important to note that they're seeing payphones conversations.
from the Denny's was made to the home of Lawrence Horne at 5:12 a.m. Maryland time, just a few hours after the murders.
What time is it?
Was it the cryptic 22-second conversation?
Yeah.
And who had made the call? Investigators spent hours scanning dozens of registration forms from local motels.
So the subpoenas, right? So see, you guys, how this all built upon itself. The subpoenas were able to allow them to identify a payphone that was used in Maryland, right? around the time, a few hours after the murder. So now they're like, okay, let's look at all the hotels in that area because this person probably was an out-of-towner. And that's how they're able to get to this point.
Check of the hotels and the motels in the area, a few miles circumference of the murder scene, turned up an individual checking in approximately midnight the day these murders were committed.
Checking in at midnight.
To the day's end, using a Michigan driver's license in the name of James Edward Perry.
Oh, shit.
James Edward Perry seemed a promising suspect. With Lawrence Horne's roots in Detroit's music industry and the Detroit call in his telephone records, perhaps there was a connection. Background checks revealed he'd served about 10 years' time for shooting a Michigan state trooper after an attempted bank robbery in the early 1970s.
Shooting a state trooper. Oh, shit! Looks like a promising suspect.
Now he was a minister.
He claimed he would.
Now he's a minister. He's but one of the Lord.
Be able to pick lottery numbers for people. People could call him for his advice. He had business cards and flyers that he would hand out. That he was, like I say, a minister. I believe he called himself on some of these things Apostle James.
As investigators learned more about Perry, Wittenberger in Lawrence Horne's telephone records, he'd noticed some calls had been made on a calling card.
What do you want?
He subpoenaed the records. The name on the card was Camilla McKinney. FBI agents appeared at Camilla's address. Instead, they found Marcia Webb.
I'm so aggressive.
It turned out she was Lawrence Horne's cousin.
Oh, no.
She said Horne had asked her to get the card, claiming he needed
Lawrence
it for
Horne
business.
told me to get a card.
She'd made up the name McKinney. She thought her past payment problems might keep her from getting a card.
All right, now you guys are probably wondering, what the hell is a calling card? Basically, guys, it's a card that allows a user to make phone calls up to a specified value or charge the cost to a specific account. So it's a way to kind of like, you know, shell your activities on a phone to another level. So obviously, this is another red flag as well to conceal the nature of the phone calls and the fact that he had a relative do it for him under another name, more of a red flag.
The calling card records revealed a complex web of phone calls. They began almost a year before the murders.
Oh, wow.
And continued for several months after.
We examined the records for that calling card account and saw that there were numerous calls throughout 1992 and 1993 from payphones in Los Angeles. Payphones that we plotted out on a street grid, primarily within walking distance of Lawrence Horne's house.
More clues.
It went directly to James Perry's house in Detroit. And likewise, there were numerous calls from 1992 to 1993 of payphones throughout Detroit, primarily on the east side of Detroit, which is where James Perry lived, to Lawrence Horne's house in Hollywood.
And we figured Perry was looking for the rest of his payment. And we surmised that that Horne was waiting for his windfall from his son's estate.
But if it seemed investigators had finally hit the jackpot, the prize remained just out of their grasp. Connecting suspects to calls required painstaking detective work, logging the time and phone number where each call was made and received, then attempting to place the suspects accordingly.
It's a lot of work, guys. A lot of old-fashioned detective work right there.
Because none of these
Horne
calls
Perry
get recorded or saved anywhere like today, right?
No.
These payphone
No, with these
they're
payphones,
gone
no.
forever. Damn.
You would have to wiretap the phone to be able to get those records. The only thing you can get from the payphones is like the call records of like when a phone call was made and to where, but that's about it.
So
you can't get the actual contents of it.
Their best bet is having like some camera footage that shows proof who was in these payphones, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, in the 90s, they wouldn't have that.
They have nothing in 90s.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That sucks.
It was tough, man. And the fact that these guys were using calling cards and all this other stuff made it even tougher.
Covered their tracks with many layers of deception. Investigators were beginning to bog down, and their frustration was starting to show.
It starts out at an extremely fast pace. Everything's hot and heavy, very high-profile murder case. Everything, like I say, is rocking and rolling very quickly. Then all of a sudden, the skids are put on. The investigation starts to slow down because now we've almost shifted gears and now going into a documentation that turns into almost a paper trail case.
And I can tell you guys this from my experience that going from like, a response case like that where things are moving fast to all of a sudden it's like a document paper case. You're like, fuck, like, man. What? And you just get mad as hell because you're just like, because you want to go ahead and get things done. But obviously when you got, a complex situation like this where you got a bunch of phone calls, you got conspirators, across state lines, coast to coast, you got to make sure, and it's a murder case, obviously it's very serious. You need to be able to look at all the records, okay? And on top of that, these guys took some meticulous steps to protect their identities from being discovered for after the crime. So let's see how the police were able to crack this one.
But Wittenberger and the FBI stayed on the trail like bloodhounds. And in late September of 1993, they closed in on James Perry. They began a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week surveillance.
And I'll tell you guys this, doing surveillance 24/7 is a pain in the ass. As a guy that's done it before, it requires a shit ton of manpower. You need different shifts. You're going to need, 8 to 10 guys per surveillance block. It is not easy to do, man. So the fact that they were going so hard, lets you know the gravity of the importance of this case, right? A child was killed and 2 women, a nurse and a mother. So they're going to do what they got to do to make sure that they catch these guys. Because at this point, they got some good circumstantial evidence, but they don't have anything actually concrete that identifies these guys as the cold hard killers.
We had the Michigan State Police and the FBI. Both agencies agreed to put him under surveillance in a cooperative effort.
And this is a great teamwork, by the way. The fact that the Maryland state investigators are the main guys that are running the case, and then you got the FBI and the Michigan State Police that are assisting, that are donating quite a bit of manpower to making this case happen. And obviously, I'm sure the Michigan State Police would be interested because this guy shot a Michigan State trooper back in the day, so they're probably trying to get their revenge on this guy. Like, hey, this guy's involved. All right, we're involved. So
it was during a week in September that we saw that James Perry hung out with a particular individual. We didn't know who he was until we checked the tag of his car. This guy named Thomas Turner.
Bam, and they identified him through what? 24/7 surveillance. This is old-fashioned police work, my friends. You're not going to be able to get information like this a lot of the times unless you watch your guy and see who they're meeting with what they're doing, etc. So this was a very important lead for them.
A background check showed the 52-year-old Turner was a trucker by trade. More significantly, he was another of Lawrence Horne's cousins.
Oh,
he was also
another
fast
clue
friends with Perry. The two had met in prison 13 years before, when Perry was serving time for the state trooper shooting incident and Turner for robbing a bank.
Bam, another big link.
Identifying Turner would prove an important break in the case. But for now, investigators were hoping for something more immediate. Wittenberger and an agent did what investigators call tickling the wires. They paid Perry a visit, thinking Perry would then contact Horne and start talking.
I've done this myself before. It's actually a pretty good technique to allow you to go ahead and stimulate the investigation a little bit. And since they were already looking at the phone records, it allows them to kind of just be like, oh, you know what? Let's poke the bear a little bit, see what happens with these guys. Because if you're able to poke the bear and and you're actually monitoring the phone lines pretty tightly, you'll be able to see patterns of communication. And if he goes ahead and contacts Horne or the other guy right after the police made contact, well, there's a pretty good sign, more than likely, that they're going to be talking about some type of criminal activity, like, oh, the police hit me up, blah blah blah, we need to watch out, etc. So I actually have done this myself before, where I would, you know, when I was on the wiretap, I would, you know, we would basically like make contact with the bad guys, or we would have an informant call and, you know, say something, and then watch the fucking phone lines go crazy with him, like calling other people saying like, yo, I think this is going on, blah 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 blah, and allows you to kind of get insight as to the criminal activity in the criminal organization a bit more. So, ladies, got anything?
Interesting. No, I didn't know that that was used. Why? Like, wouldn't that give it away to them that they're being watched or spied?
It could. It's definitely a calculated risk, and it can cause some potential issues. It's always a risk, but you know, it works. I mean, it definitely allows for you know, how do I say this? It's a calculated risk that allows for you to get identify other people and or see who's really involved. You know, so in this case, since they're kind of probably lower on evidence, they have a lot of good circumstantial evidence. They probably want to get something a little bit more solid. So we'll see what ends up happening with them doing this tickling of the wire. And it's interesting because at this point, I don't think they're wiretapping phones yet. So this is a really good technique to use when you're wiretapping phones.
But they have the technology for it, right? At this point,
To wiretap phones?
They could do it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, hell, they started wiretapping phones, I think, in like
The 70s.
yeah, before that. They're wiretapping phones like in the I think the first wiretap was, you know, I'm gonna look it up. I think it was like in the 50s. But they were monitoring the phones, like probably with pen registers, which is like an active feed, allows you to see who's calling in and out. But I don't think they were on wiretaps at this point yet. But I'm actually curious to see when they first started doing wiretaps. It was a long time ago though, and maybe even in the 1920s. But let me double check.
The investigators only talked briefly with Perry, but he admitted he was in Maryland on March 3rd, though he claimed it was for business and that he knew nothing about the murders.
Oh, so he admitted he was in Maryland. Stupid. Right around the time of the murders. What the hell is a guy from Detroit doing out there in Maryland with no family or anything? That's a clue.
In September of '93, after weeks of wrangling for a court authorization to tap Lawrence Horne's home phone, federal agents finally got the go-ahead. Special Agent Roach was key in obtaining the approval.
Okay, so wiretapping got to start in New York in 1895 when a former telephone worker who had joined the city police suggested that it might be a good idea to listen in on wires used by criminals. So, damn, long ass time.
Wow.
That's wild. Yeah. So they go. So now, guys, as you can see, they get a federal wiretap on Perry, which is huge. You know, now they can actually listen to the phones. So they'll be able to hear conversations real time of what they're talking about. And I'll tell you guys this from my personal experience. Listening to phones is a pain. Well, listening to phones is a pain in the ass. Getting a wiretap in the first place is an even bigger pain in the ass. You got to write up like a 70 to 100-page affidavit as to why you think you need to go ahead and listen to this phone. A lot of the times it takes more probable cause to listen to someone's phone than it does to arrest them.
We were hoping to get the smoking gun, the conversation between James Edward Perry and Lawrence Horne. We were hoping for a conversation that would say something like, I want the rest of my money. You know, I did the deed. The down payment's not enough. You promised me such and such. I only got this. And now I want the rest of my money, or maybe you're going to be next. Something like
wishful thinking, my friend.
That would have been terrific.
But Horne and Perry were too sly to let anything slip. And by mid-November, with the investigation at full tilt, they stopped talking to each other altogether. Despite months of slow but steady progress,
These guys are smart, man.
Horne and Perry were still one step ahead of the law. The FBI's coast-to-coast investigation of a triple murder committed in Maryland left agents scrambling to link LA's Lawrence Horne and Detroit's James Perry to their case. Investigators knew the two men were talking, but they didn't know how. Were they using Perry's former jail buddy, Thomas Turner, as a go-between? The FBI secured authorization to tap Turner's phone,
So now they wiretap Turner's phone because the other two guys stopped talking to each other. Let's see what happens.
Yep.
That was the key.
Yeah, what's up?
Bam.
Both Horne and Perry talked
yeah.
to Turner often,
Yeah, okay,
and
that's
Turner
no problem.
relayed messages between them. But they were careful not to use language that might incriminate them. And once again, agents found themselves back in the same old grind, monitoring and logging hundreds of calls, then trying to make links between the callers.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
One surveillance would be taking place, actively taking place, physical surveillance in Los Angeles on Lawrence Horne, while at the same time, 24 hours a day, the Detroit division was conducting physical and electronic surveillance on Thomas Turner and physical surveillance on James Edward Perry.
Ridiculous manpower needed to do that.
As before, they made a few connections between calls and callers. But mostly, the process seemed just a test of their endurance and dedication. Horne and Perry were giving them a run for their money.
So here's a conspiracy, guys. Just a quick little recap of what's going on here so everyone knows. So you got Horne, who pretty much wanted to get his wife and son killed because he had a big lawsuit settlement, $1.7 million, which is the equivalent of about $3.4 million today in 2022. He would get that if his son died, and obviously he would have had to split that with his wife, so he wants her out the picture too, right? So bam, he would be like the main organizer. Then you got Perry, who's the alleged potential hitman who was in Maryland when the murder occurred, okay? And you got Turner, who is Lawrence Horne's cousin, but also a good friend of Perry, and they had served time together in prison when Perry was in there for shooting a Michigan state trooper. So they're surveilling all three parties now at this point because Turner is the middleman, go-between between Perry and Horne, because they suspect that the feds might be listening to their phones and they don't want to be identified. So these guys were very sharp, you know. I mean, and you see that there was communication between the Perry and Horne since 1992, so a year prior to the murders.
Then, around Thanksgiving, after 3 grueling months, investigators got a bite. Perry was preparing to move. Agents secured a federal warrant to search his residence before he left.
That's a good time to search because you know he's going to have all of his stuff ready to go and packed up at the spot before he moves.
It was a dangerous mission. Perry had shot a Michigan police officer, and he was known to own high-powered weapons. An FBI SWAT team made the entry. Wittenberger and his partner followed. They roused Perry and his girlfriend from bed, catching
These actors are hilarious.
them unaware and unarmed. Then they began.
I just have to say that was terrible cuffing technique, you know, coming from a former law enforcement officer. That's fine. They got to do what they got to do, right?
To search the house. Police collected videotapes, bank statements, and other documents. Much of what they found seemed strangely out of place in the home of a so-called minister. There were voodoo relics, Soldier of Fortune magazines, and books on topics like criminal investigations, managing gunshot wounds, and interpreting bloodstain evidence.
Why would a minister have all that stuff right there?
Investigators hoped to prove that Perry had bought the books as well. They called the publishers, getting only one hit from Paladin Press. A canceled check proved to be the turning point in the case. Perry had ordered 2 books from Paladin Press about a year before the murders. 2 chilling titles: Hitman, a manual for independent contractors, and...
Oh, this book looks familiar. Look what I got, guys. Hope you. So I went ahead and got this book for you guys. This book is banned, by the way, and you guys are going to see why here in a bit. Yeah, and it was actually kind of expensive as well because they don't make it anymore. But this is the book, and you guys are going to see here in a second why this book was extremely relevant to this investigation.
how to build disposable silencers.
When you read through those books, it was...
So it was 2 books, one on building disposable silencers and Hitman, a technical manual for independent contractors.
It's illegal to make your own silencers too, right? believe.
Yeah, I know having a silencer, it's not illegal to have one. You just got to pay taxes on it. But if you're going to make your own homemade, yeah, more than likely, I would assume it's probably
I think
illegal.
I remember reading that it's illegal to make your
Yeah,
own.
I'm sure it is. Because you can buy one and have it, but you got to pay taxes on it, and it's got to be registered with the ATF. So if you make your own, yeah, it's probably going to be illegal. I'd have to ask my ATF buddy about that one.
I remember reading about that and something along the lines of like only certain arms can have silencers on them, and other ones like it's not allowed.
Yeah, no, for sure, that is true.
Very disturbing to see the number of similarities and parallels from the Hitman book to what transpired inside Millie's home on March 3rd.
Finally, the pieces began to form a single picture. Mildred's missing minivan was explained. Perry had used it to get back to his rental car, which he'd parked some distance from the crime scene, as the book recommended. The credit cards found by a jogger on a road near the house also fit in neatly.
It said, if you want to make it look like a burglary, do a little bit of messing around the house, take some items and then throw them along the side of the road. It said, throw the pieces of the rifle along the side of the road. Another thing that the book recommended was to take a little narrow file and run it through the barrel of the rifle. And a little narrow file was found in the backyard with deposits of chemicals consistent with gunshot residue.
The book also suggested using it.
And also, so I'll show you guys real quick what they're talking about when it comes to the filing, right? So as you guys can see here, bam, okay, it goes here. Using a rat tail, and I got it highlighted for y'all right there. Using a rat tail file, alter the gun barrel, the shell, chamber, the loading, sorry guys, I feel like a teacher here reading to a class. Chamber, the loading ramp, the firing pin, and the ejector pin. Each of these items leaves its own definite mark and impression on the shell casing, which, if any shells happen to be left behind, can be matched up to the gun under a microscope in the police laboratory. So that is true, guys. Each gun that fires a bullet creates its own individual fingerprint on said bullet. So by getting rid of certain things on the weapon, altering the gun barrel, that will also help. And then also with the serial number here, I gotta find the page here. I'll find it. I'll keep playing the documentary for y'all, and I'll find it. But it talks about how to also file down the. What page is it?
I folded it.
Where? Okay. While Christina does that, we'll keep playing the documentary for y'all.
An AR-7 rifle, exactly the gun whose trigger mechanism was found earlier. Likewise, examiners determined the single spent bullet found in Trevor's room was .22 caliber, popular with assassins.
Also in the book, where they suggested the AR-7 right here, you go to your recommended equipment list, right? Let me bring that closer to you guys so you can see what I'm talking about here. You see it right there, AR-7 rifle. Base equipment checklist, and 360 powered scope, disposal rifle silencer, 2 extra 15 or 30 short rifle clips, 22 Ruger Mark 1 or Mark 2 pistol, disposal pistol silencer, shoulder holster, extra pistol clip, and then hollow point bullets. So it's on the equipment list, man. Yeah, let's keep going.
22s distort when they enter a human body, so it's hard to match them to a gun. They're also small, quiet, and inexpensive. In January.
Now, as far as the serial number of the gun, guys, I found the page right here. So it goes right here. So second, this is page 23, second paragraph right here. So it goes, If the serial number is on the barrel of the gun, grinding deeply enough to remove it may weaken the barrel to the point that the gun could explode in your face when fired. To make these numbers untraceable, use a hammer and chisel or a numbering set purchased from the hardware store to stamp them out or make them illegible. Make sure your blows go as deep or as little or a little deeper than existing numbers. Then grind the serial numbers off slightly. This method will keep the true serial number from being raised in any acid test if the part is found.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
That's
detailed,
so
huh?
detailed. That's crazy.
January of 1994, there was another big break in the case. After months of pressure from Wittenberger, a grand jury subpoena finally brought in Thomas Turner. He agreed to...
So they brought Thomas Turner on a grand jury subpoena. What's a grand jury subpoena, guys? A grand jury subpoena is basically when you use a grand jury, which is you convene a bunch of citizens from the local area. Think of it as like a jury almost, right? In a criminal investigation, and they basically hear a case out, and then they can go ahead and get you a grand jury subpoena to bring someone in and testify under oath, of course, to the grand jury. And they can't lie. It's basically like a deposition. So in this case, they brought this guy in and to testify, and you're going to see here in a second why he ended up cooperating.
Talk in exchange for immunity.
Because they could have got him for conspiracy as well. So for him not being charged, he's going to go ahead and sing like a bird.
In a deposition for a Maryland grand jury, Turner said his cousin, Lawrence Horne, had come for a visit in May of 1992, 5 months before the murders. Though Turner hadn't seen him in 20 years, Horne immediately complained of trouble with his ex-wife Mildred. Turner gave him the name of James Perry. That's all Turner would say, though Wittenberger believed he knew much more. Fortunately, he'd said enough.
At that point, because of what we had learned from Thomas Turner and what we had learned from the Hitman book and the wiretaps, we felt we were in a position to establish a conspiracy, to establish that James Perry had in fact carried out the killings.
That summer, Wittenberger struck. On July 19th, 1994, he arrested Horne at his Los Angeles apartment without incident.
Oh, they finally got him.
Gotcha, bitch! Wittenberger would question him for 45 minutes at the police station, but Horne refused to talk about the crime. On the same day, FBI agents in Detroit were waiting for a judge to sign the warrants for the arrest of Perry. In the meantime, they conducted an overt surveillance. The tactic is designed to pressure a suspect while making sure he doesn't flee.
It wasn't supposed to be a covert surveillance, and we really didn't care if he saw them or not. We just didn't want it to be a confrontational surveillance until the warrants were signed.
Once the warrants were finalized, agents could arrest Perry. Until then, they would follow him in the open, knowing he knew they were there. They would keep him in sight at all times. Perry grew increasingly annoyed. The FBI didn't let up. It seemed Perry wondered what the FBI was trying to do, though he seemed more irritated than concerned.
He probably thought they didn't have enough on him.
Still in clear view of
What was that?
He probably just thought they didn't have enough on him.
Yeah, exactly. So he's annoyed. He's like, what the hell? Why are these guys following me? Little does he know.
They didn't know where he was headed, but stayed with him anyway.
Watching.
He stopped to pick up a friend. A man the agents were not familiar with. The two drove off in Perry's car, with the tail close behind.
Well, let's give him something to play with. Stay right on.
Then, incredulous, agents guessed where Perry was going. After only about an hour, the constant tale had made Perry so angry, he decided to file a complaint. Amazingly, he took his gripe straight to the Detroit FBI field office.
Wow.
Stupid! Perry's timing was incredible. He and his friend arrived at the office just as FBI agents awaited final word on his arrest warrant.
I want to see an FBI agent now. This is a bad idea. Oh, now! I want to see an FBI agent right now.
Perry demanded to see an agent,
I'm not going to calm down.
and he was quickly accommodated. A clerk called Special Agent Roach.
Bring heat on yourself.
Bring one in. Come on, you're home now.
Sir, would you step aside, please?
While agents checked him for weapons, Perry confronted Roach, wanting to know if agents were going to arrest him or if they were just planning to harass him.
First of all, I appreciate
And we told him in minutes, you were going to expect a phone call from Montgomery County, Maryland, telling us the warrants have been signed and you've been indicted for 3 counts of first-degree murder.
Holy shit, just let him know.
Came in a few minutes later, and we advised him that he was, in fact, under arrest.
Oh, man, that's a fucking L for him. Could you imagine?
He showed up so entitled.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm tired of this shit. Stop following me.
But now, even with both men in custody, one question still remained. If Perry was the hired gun, how had Horne paid him for the crime? After months of relentless pursuit by local investigators and the FBI, the elusive Horne and Perry were finally in custody. But there remained a nagging question. How had Horne paid Perry for the crime? The answer came 2 months later, only as a result of still more dogged detective work.
As we were reviewing the results of the search on James Perry's house, we noticed this photograph that in essence showed various cassette tapes that James Perry had. That was the purpose of the photograph, but underneath one of the items here, we saw a Western Union card. We got a bundle of records from Western Union showing us that there were indeed a number of transactions from Los Angeles.
Now we finally got the money trail.
To James Perry's live-in girlfriend.
Of course, it's a Wells Fargo, too.
Person
Well, yeah, Wells Fargo, the worst bank
George
ever.
Bernard Shaw. Well, we now had another area to investigate for a few months.
After much digging, Dean discovered a man named George Bernard Shaw had died in July of 1992 in an auto accident in Los Angeles. When Dean sleuthed out the LA Times for the day of Shaw's death, he discovered the man's connection, though it wasn't in his obituary.
We have on the front page, Mary Wells dies. And for those in our generation, she was a big Motown star. Go to the obituary page, big story about Mary Wells dying in Los Angeles. In the lower right-hand corner was a list of other people who had passed away. One is a guy named George Bernard Shaw, with no information about him, just the cemetery.
Lawrence Horne had used the name of this anonymous dead man as the front for his payments, which were made with the money Horne was able to save. Almost 2 years after the crime, investigators had finally pieced together the whole story.
Bam. So now we're going to go into a summary of the investigation of what they think actually occurred that led to these crimes. And guys, they got a pretty good amount of circumstantial evidence, which they're going to go over right now. But before they do that, guys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You know what I mean? We're making content like this for all the time. We do one documentary breakdown per week, and we also do one live stream per week. And we also release clips almost every day. So please subscribe to the channel, like the video. Guys, any thoughts so far before we get into how the police suspect that these guys did this?
I just think it's interesting how part of his motive, I mean, obviously $1.7 million is a pretty penny, but
Yeah.
he would have gone to jail for the $18,000 that he owed. So it was partially also driven by him not wanting to go to jail.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ironic. So
And
then he
18K.
commits a bigger crime that'll give him even more jail time.
And you know what? Let me look up, since you said that, $18,000. What's your thoughts on this, Christina?
I just think he's so stupid to like.
You gotta
keep
talk up.
everything.
Speak up. Speak up.
I just think he's completely stupid to keep everything. Like I would like literally burn everything, toss
Mm.
it away. Like we kept everything.
Like the book and the
Everything.
instructions, yeah.
Like it's just retarded.
Yeah, I don't think he knew that the police were looking at him. But $18,000 in 1993 is the equivalent purchasing power to about $36,000 today, so about double. So
Yeah. But it doesn't matter on the amount. Like if you don't pay child support, you eventually end up in jail
Yeah.
after a couple.
no,
times
absolutely,
of them
absolutely. And back then, that's a lot of money. So
Yeah.
regardless, even in today's day and age, $18,000 is a lot. So all right, let's get into how they how they think this happened.
It had been a cold and calculated murder for hire that took more than a year to plan. James Perry had followed the instructions in the Hitman book almost to a T. Perry had bought an AR-7 rifle and drilled out the serial number as the book suggested.
And just so you guys know, in the book, okay, it does suggest the AR-7 as the primary weapon, and I'll read that little portion for you guys right here, okay? And this is on page 22. The AR-7, and it's right here. The AR-7 is recommended because it is both inexpensive and accurate. The barrel breaks down for storage inside the stock with a clip. It is lightweight and easy to carry or conceal when disassembled. The rifle has a ridge on top that will easily accept the scope, even though it is not cut for one. Put the scope in place, tighten it down, then sight it in. After sighting it in, scratch a mark behind each scope clamp to allow remounting of the scope without sighting it each time. A 3 to 6 powered scope is recommended to ensure accuracy at up to 65 yards. When braced, 8 to 15 shots should cover a 4-inch pattern area with no difficulty. Wow. So that's pretty detailed right there, guys. And sorry, it's really hard to like read it to y'all while looking at the camera. So my apologies there. So so that's what the book says, pretty much verbatim as far as which weapon to use. And we read earlier about the serial number and scratching it out, which the book also gives detailed information on that.
Disposable silencer using the book's directions.
The disposable silencer. Guys, this book has an entire chapter on silencers, okay? And I'm going to show you this real quick. Starting on page 37. Bam. Look at this. The disposable silencer, all right? An entire chapter on this. And it has pictures, diagrams, how to make your silencer.
Wow.
It's pretty detailed, my friends. Okay. And it goes A to Z on how to do it. It has it starts on page 37 is the chapter, and then on 42 it goes ahead. It starts actually showing you diagrams of how to do it, which is, it's pretty interesting stuff right here.
Also, I Googled it. It's technically legal to make a silencer, but you have to do it a very specific way, and you have to register the device.
So you can make it, but you got to register it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it has to be made in a very specific way.
Mm.
That is not like, I guess, whatever that is. Like
I guess.
that's probably a very
This
very
is probably
fancy
made in a way that they can actually do a hit, right?
Yeah.
He'd carefully cut the parts and assembled it. He also packed a bag of supplies, a brown mechanic suit so he could walk through Mildred's neighborhood looking like a repairman, and latex gloves so he'd leave no fingerprints. In the months before the crime, he and Horne had talked often, discussing each detail. At Perry's request, Horne had sent him a map of Mildred's neighborhood and a video of Trevor's room. Horne had chosen a date when Tamiel would be out of the house, his only show of mercy in this heinous crime.
Yep. Didn't want the daughter there.
On the appointed day, Perry had driven a car rented by Turner from Detroit. He checked into a motel near Mildred's house in Maryland.
And just so you guys know, disguising, right? They discuss this in a book as well with disguises. And this is on page 105. Okay. It says here, at the bottom here, where my middle finger is, even if someone sees you casually leaving the victim's house, he has, bear with me here, guys, because I'm reading this from the camera. He has no idea of the reason of your visit or what you have done, and your disguise will conceal your identity, okay? And then walk, don't run to your car or whatever your planned destination might be. The first thing you do when you reach the car is to change into another disguise and get out of those work clothes. Check them for bloodstains. If there are none, you can toss them into a charity collection box or trash can. If the victim's blood is on those clothes, they must be burned or buried. So, yeah, this book is pretty damn thorough.
Wow.
Perry had paid cash, as the book recommended, hoping the motel wouldn't require an ID.
I have to see some ID.
Paying cash.
Need to see.
But it did.
Oh, shit.
Without his Xerox driver's license, police might never have cracked the case.
Stupid. We couldn't believe that he did something that dumb.
Stupid.
Put him in Silver Spring, Maryland, on the date and the time of the murders.
Stupid.
Then he'd driven his rental car to a shopping center near Mildred's house and walked from there, following Horne's hand-drawn map.
Hand-drawn map.
So in theory, this book would work if it wasn't for the human error that happened there.
Yeah, with him messing up with that, yeah, it would have been way harder for them to find him.
Crazy.
Because they were able to put him at the location at the same time.
In the house, unsuspecting, Nurse Janice Saunders made the 2 a.m. entry on a medical log attached to Trevor's bed.
And real quick, guys, this is what the firearm looks like when it's fully assembled right here. Okay, that's the AR-7 with the makeshift silencer on it. So now we're going to go into how we actually committed the crime here.
Perry approached the French doors at the back of the house, as planned. Though locked, the doors were easily opened.
And just so you guys know, the book does have a chapter on, or not a chapter, but a section, page 30, called Uninvited Entry. Following is a template for lockpicks, which will allow you to make a completely adequate set of picks out of ordinary hacksaw blades ground to shape on your workshop grinder. The standard picks, notice that one has slightly less angle at the tip. These two are the most commonly used. And then bam, the torsion bar. Notice a small step down at the tip to allow for different sized key slots. A large, thick hairpin makes a good torsion bar. So this book also talks about how to break in as well. So, and then they got a whole part here on lockpick directions and surveillance.
Where's the guy that wrote this today? Is he still alive?
I don't know. That's a good question. Do they even have his name here? Rex Farrell, probably a fake pen name.
Oh, yeah.
He entered, barely making a sound. Inside, he assembled his rifle and homemade silencer.
I have some interesting information.
Go ahead, share with the people.
The author was actually a woman. And
oh,
I know, right? And she was never actually a killer. She was a cash poor divorced mother of 2 from Florida who needed money to pay her property taxes.
What? Was she actually a hitman or no?
No, she was never a killer.
Wow.
Just a woman that needed to pay taxes. In Florida, too.
Oh, man. Fantastic. Oh, wow.
There's a photo of her. Here, wait, just put it
That's
on
her?
camera.
Oh, hold on. Let me put it back. Let me put it on camera. This is the girl right here, guys. This is the hitman. What the fuck?
Very Karen looking. Isn't that funny?
Holy shit, man. God damn
Who
it.
would have thought?
Who would have thought, man? My man Perry took advice from a Karen. That's why he's in prison now.
He likely took Saunders completely by surprise.
There's a noise.
But when the boy stopped breathing, his medical alarm spoke for him. Upstairs, his mother awoke. Mildred Horne went downstairs to investigate.
And keep in mind, guys, he probably had to kill the son in a certain way for them to be able to get the lawsuit money, which is probably why instead of shooting him, he pulled the breathing device.
There, she too met the killer. Perry shot Mildred 3 times in the face.
Lawrence probably told him to do that.
Then Perry roughed up the house a little to make it look like a robbery gone bad. As the book instructed, he took Mildred's credit cards. But it seems the persistent beeping of the medical alarm unnerved even this calculating killer. He stuck to the manual instructions. On his way out, he quickly bored out the gun barrel, using the metal file to foil ballistics tests as the book instructed.
And then also, just so you guys know, on page 104, okay, they instruct here if hold on. Sorry. It goes here if the hit was supposed to look like a burglary, mess the place up a bit and take anything of value that you can carry concealed. Of course, you can't keep anything. These items will have to be ditched along with your work clothes and weapon, but any cash you find is yours to pocket. So that's where they got that part from. And then also, talking about the gloves, they actually give a funny part right here, which I thought was very interesting, paying attention to detail. Oh, hold on, let me move this. If you have to take a piss, flush the toilet with your gloved fingers. You can't imagine how many idiots will remove the gloves to facilitate Operation Zipper to take a pee without thinking they flush before pulling the gloves back, pulling the gloves back on, leaving indisputable evidence to convict them on the primary sources for prints during the investigation. So, yeah, a lot of detail here, and that's the importance of the gloves as well, which is also discussed in this book. And using a rental car as well is discussed. Let me see if I can find that page for y'all.
For a quick escape, he took Mildred's minivan back to where his rental car was parked. On the way, he'd scattered Mildred's credit cards and the gun parts, though only the trigger mechanism was found.
All right, so I'm sitting there Can you take a picture? I can take a picture of him, right there, but I could the noise, you understand what I'm saying? I wasn't able to do that. I didn't want to go front right.
It was a case that had to be put together by really an exhaustive search of.
And real quick, with the rental cars, I'll show you guys right here. This is on page 97, last paragraph. Okay, it goes. Bring that into focus. Give me 1 second. Why is it not? God damn it. I don't know why it's not focusing right now. Okay, there we go. If for some reason you cannot fly, you may have to drive. Trains and buses are too slow, and the trip would tire you considerably. But if time permits, train and bus travel may be the safest method available. In any event, never use your own automobile as a means to getting to the job site. A rental car would be best.
Job site.
Yeah, I love how they call it that.
Of every clue possible, every clue imaginable. And we literally spent 1.5 years, 2 years doing nothing but working on this case.
In September of 1995, 2.5 years after the murders,
There he is.
James Perry was brought to trial.
That's the hitman right there. Looks kind of crazy. Huh? Needs a bad hair day.
in Maryland. Bob Dean served as special prosecutor because of his intimate knowledge of the case. Perry received life for conspiracy and 3 death sentences for the murders. Those death sentences were later commuted to life. Perry has no chance for parole. He is never admitted to committing the crime. Lawrence Horne's trial began that April in a packed Maryland courtroom.
So Lawrence went to trial.
He faced the same charges as Perry, so much of the same evidence was used. Bob Dean again served as special prosecutor. After a 5-week trial, the jury found Horne guilty on all counts. He showed no emotion, and like Perry, he never confessed to the crime. On May 13th, Horne received 3 life sentences without parole. He appealed once and was denied.
Justice is served.
I think both Mr. Horne and Mr. Perry did a very good job in planning this, and they came very close to getting away with this.
There would be one more bittersweet victory for the families of the victims. Following the murders, they filed a federal lawsuit against the publishers of Hitman, a technical manual for independent contractors. In late May of 1999, they won the suit, including a multi-million-dollar settlement and a promise from the publisher to stop selling the book.
Wow. Crazy stuff, huh?
How did you get it if it's banned?
I was able to find it on Amazon, but it was more expensive significantly. It was like $70 or something. So, yeah. Ladies, final thoughts. Fresh's favorite quote on the documentary.
I'm just shocked. What an interesting book. Like, I'm shocked by the book. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Christina? And thank you, by the way. Christina was really helpful in getting this thing for me. So shout out to her. What are your thoughts on this, Christina?
I just feel like you have to be a sick man to kill your own son.
Yeah, that is crazy.
So, yeah. That part.
Spare the daughter, though. Spare the daughter.
Yeah, because they're like not gonna. They're pretty much not comatose, but.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and he had a lot of money to win. So.
Clearly didn't care about your child.
But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that one, man. The second time is going to be the charm, hopefully, on this one, man. Like I said before, we had recorded this before, but there was an audio issue. So, hey, doing it again, right? But anyway, guys, with that said, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, check me out. I post clips almost every day. We live stream on Sundays, and then I post documentary breakdowns like this, typically on Thursdays, but this one's going to come out a little bit later since we had the audio issue. Love you guys. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
I was a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, okay, guys? HSI. The cases that I did mostly were human smuggling and drug trafficking. No one else has these documents, by the way.
Here's what FedEx covers.
Dr. Lafredo confirmed lacerations due to stepping on glass.
Murder
You
investigations.
see him reaching in his jacket. You don't know, and he's positioning. Been on February 13, 2019.
You're facing 2 counts of premeditated murder.
Racketeering and RICO conspiracies.
Young Slime Life, hereinafter referred to as YSL. The defendants, 6'9", and then this is Billy Seiko right here. Now, when they first started, guys, 6'9" ran. I'm upset. I'm watching this music video. You know, I'm bobbing my head like, hey, this shit lit. But at the same time, I'm pausing. Oh, wait, who this? Right? Oh, who's that in the back?
Firearms and violent crime.
AKA Pusha violated.
You're ordered to stay away